Hey everyone, this episode is brought to you by River, the place that I personally go to securely invest in Bitcoin with confidence and with zero fees.
The word value exists in the sentence, store of value, meaning people want two things when they use something as a store of value. They want something that is durable, and they want to use something that will retain value. But the word value means a future exchange.
Roy, so, if people don't know you, I'm going to shoot them straight here. In my opinion, I think you're one of the best developers in the entire space. I've had numerous opportunities to talk with you in person, and every time I just kind of walk away with just how clear your thinking is. There's a couple developers out there, engineers that aren't just talented devs, but are great at explaining things and kind of seeing a vision of where a lot of this stuff is moving in the future. So where I want to start off, you have a company called Breez. It's on the Lightning Network. You're doing payment processing. But the thing that I want you to kind of start off talking to the audience about is really your vision. Like, where is this all going? We talk about the Lightning Network all the time on the show, but from a payments processing standpoint, how are vendors going to interact with this? There's been a lot of comments and debates as to how robust and reliable the Lightning Network is. So somebody that's building in this space, where do you see this kind of moving and evolving in the coming 5 to 10 years with respect to the Lightning Network? And then you as an entrepreneur and builder with Breez, talk a little bit about the mission of Breez.
There's a lot to unpack. So let's take a step back and kind of try to understand what is that Breez is trying to achieve. And it's really about evolving Bitcoin to be a global currency. That's basically our mission. If we talk about in this time stance that you're talking about, like 10, even 20, 30 years, let's talk about 100 years. What will happen in 100 years? We think there are two options, basically. We think the world will have a global currency, but there are two options on the global currency that will be used in the world. One option is CBDC, one global currency that is controlled by an entity. We don't know which exactly is going to be the ruling entity, but there will be an entity that governs this currency. And the second option is decentralized currency. We think Bitcoin has the best chance of being this decentralized currency. So when you talk about the Breez mission, is basically to help Bitcoin evolve to be in a place that it will be able to perform the task of a global currency. And that's where we headed. And everything that we do in Breez is to make sure Bitcoin is capable in performing the task of being a global currency. And it's not easy because Bitcoin is based on the blockchain. The Bitcoin technology is based on the blockchain, and blockchains in general don't scale. So how can you evolve Bitcoin to a place that it will be able to perform the task of money, what we tend to call medium of exchange? And there's a lot of time people kind of confuse medium of exchange with merchant adoption. I think already Bitcoin is a tremendous medium of exchange, but in order to get to a point where it's widely accepted by merchant, we need to scale Bitcoin in order for Bitcoin to be used by another, at least 2 orders of magnitudes that it's being used right now. We started Breez 6 years ago with the emergence of the Lightning Network because we think the best way to scale Bitcoin is by using Bitcoin, meaning the Lightning Network is an extension of Bitcoin. It uses Bitcoin as a bearer asset, and it provides a level of scalability that can be achieved on the Bitcoin mainnet, on the Bitcoin chain, and it works. There are challenges, as you've mentioned, and there are inherent problems to the Lightning Network that hinder the user experience, mainly what we call the inbound liquidity problem. We can talk about that if you want. But another point of friction is also the fact that it does interact with the chain from time to time, meaning in order to onboard to the Lightning Network, you need an on-chain transaction to happen. And sometimes channels get closed. And when channels get closed, you need to interact with the chain. And every time users interact with the main chain, it's a cause of friction because the chains are slow and the chain are costly. So if fees are high, it means that there's a cost to be paid. I think we've done a lot, specifically at Breez, but generally also in the Lightning ecosystem in the past 6 years. I don't know if people remember how Lightning looked like 6 years ago, but I remember myself like in the Bitcoin conference in Berlin, trying to pay for a beer using Lightning. And on average, it took us 30 times to get a payment to go
30
through.
30 tries. Yeah.
I think it was one of 30 or one of 50 tries to get the beer spilling in this hacky Bitcoin conference. And today you don't see that. No, we're not in a place where we have 99% reliability. We're in a place we have around 90 to 95% payment reliability, which by no means is good enough, but it's widely used by millions of people. The largest exchanges in the world already support Lightning. We're talking about Coinbase and Binance and Kraken. All the major exchanges support Lightning. I think Coinbase even released some statistics a few months ago that 6.8% from all the Bitcoin deposits are done using Lightning.
Oh, wow.
And it's Coinbase.
Yeah, that's pretty high.
So we're talking about definitely a significant number. There are other statistics. I think OKX are reporting 70K of active Lightning users on their exchange. So yes, Lightning didn't took the world, but I think one of the mistakes that some people had done years ago is to set the wrong expectations of what Lightning is. I think nevertheless, we did achieve the next level in the foundation. Like we've built Lightning as a foundation, which is remarkable, and millions of people are using Lightning. And I think we're ready to use Lightning as a way to scale Bitcoin and bring it to the next level. And the way I see it now, and I think I have a different vision than the vision that I started Breez. I think Lightning is going to be the common language between end users, enterprises, and subnetworks, meaning we're starting to see subnetworks evolve that brings Bitcoin to end users, what we call the last mile solution. So we see solutions like Fedi, we're seeing solutions like eCash-based solution like Cashews, and we're starting to see Arc evolve, and we're starting to see many Bitcoin layer 2. I think all of these subnetworks are going to speak Lightning, meaning Lightning going to be the interoperable language between all the subnetworks. So Lightning is here to stay.
Yeah, I really like that last point. And I think that last point is sometimes lost on people because they see eCash or they see Fedi or any of these other ones that you're talking about. And they might not understand that those other networks are dependent on Lightning being the second layer. If you want to call those third layers or whatever, I don't know what the correct terminology would be, but they're really dependent on Lightning being that middle ground between where they're at, acting in a very high frequency kind of way, but requiring more trust, and Bitcoin layer 1, which is store of value, settles every 10 minutes, a lot more robust security setup required, and all of those things. So I think that that's such a key point. Before we go any further, you have this amazing article that you recently wrote. This went out on Bitcoin Magazine. The name of this article was Bitcoin's False Dichotomy Between Store of Value and Medium of Exchange. You were using a term, I want to clear up some terminology for people that are listening to this. You were saying the term currency. And when I think currency, I typically equate it with paper money or something that's happening at a very high frequency. Like the money that you would have in your wallet is a currency. It's, we can get into the backing, which is, it gets really mutilated in the difference between currency and money, because these are the two terms that I think are really important for people to wrap their head around. And when we're talking about money, typically we're talking about something that has some type of proof of work or some type of backing to it, call it gold. Like, I think nobody would disagree that gold is money. Whether it's actually saleable and you can use it as a form of currency, and you wrote a little bit about this in the article, it gets a lot harder because in order to make it more saleable, you really need to kind of ride a paper currency on top of it because it's just so scarce.
Not portable.
Yeah, it's not portable. That's a better way to put it. But these two terms, currency, which is high frequency or representation of money, And then you have money itself, which is this proof of work backed. And with Bitcoin, we have something that has the potential and is both of these things simultaneously with respect to being able to spend it at a very high frequency way. But we get into the technical challenges of doing it, which I find really interesting because it's a representation of what we've seen throughout human history. And even though we've moved completely into the digital realm, these things that existed in the physical realm of, it's really hard to make gold saleable. It's really hard to do. And it's just mind blowing to me that Bitcoin has the exact same challenges, even though at the base layer, it's still digital. So
100%.
Talk us through. So like people are hearing that and they're saying, well, how is that even possible? Like, what are you talking about? Okay. Right. So how do we explain this? And you do this in your article and you do a lot more in the article too, but let's start there to explain like, why is it still so hard to make it saleable in a secure way and like all that nuance?
Okay. Again, a lot to unpack here. I think comparing to gold, for example, gold didn't become gold as a sellable asset until people started minting gold coins. Now, the question is, in my mind, has Bitcoin reached the point where we mint Bitcoin as a coin? Meaning, is it easy enough, convenient enough to exchange Bitcoin in a portable, divisible, fungible way? So let's take a step back and talk about store of value and medium of exchange, because basically these are the properties we're talking about when we talk about money.
And that question that you proposed, I think needs just a touch more to it, which is, can you do that on your own without some type of custodian or assistance from somebody else, right?
Yes.
Can you transact in a way that it's just you doing it? Or are you reliant on some other person to provide a service for you to do it?
Okay. So when I talk about Bitcoin, I talk about self-custodial Bitcoin. Everything, all the work that we do at Breez is self-custodial Bitcoin, meaning you own the keys, you own the Bitcoin. You're not relying on a third party or an intermediate to do the exchange for you. When I say Bitcoin, I inherently and implicitly say self-custodial Bitcoin. And as I know, maybe that's not the way people are using the term Bitcoin and people equating the term Bitcoin with self-custodial. But when I say Bitcoin, I mean self-custodial because that encapsulates the value proposition of Bitcoin, which is basically, there are two pillars to the value proposition of Bitcoin. One is the scarcity of Bitcoin, the fact that we only will have 21 million coins. And secondly, the fact that you can't do an exchange without relying on a third party or another entity or individual to perform the task for you, the exchange of value. So basically in this article, and I'm just a fled, I'm not an historian and I'm not an economic scholar, I'm just a fled. But when I say store of value, and when people say store of value, the word value exists in the sentence, store of value, meaning people want two things when they use something as a store of value. They want something that is durable, and they want to use something that will retain value. But the word value means a future exchange. You don't want to store something for nothing. You want to store something because you know you're going to sell the asset later on. It can be years, it can be decades. You might not even sell it, but it means that you have the ability to sell something in the future. Again, there are different theories of value. There's the labor theory of value, that value reflects the work that you put into something. That's kind of the Marxist theory of value. And there's people frequently use the term intrinsic value. Like there's like inherent value or something.
Very Warren Buffett like.
Yeah. I think people use it without understanding. There's no value without context. Meaning a barrel of water in the desert is worth like all the gold in the world in a very specific context. So all value is contextual. Well, once you understand that all value is contextual, you understand there's nothing like the intrinsic value doesn't really exist. Like you don't use gold because you have the ability to make it to a jewelry at some point.
It's a function of that. There's an idea that's often discussed called the coincidence of wants. Meaning, if you're in a desert and you're, like ready to die and you need water to survive, and I have that water and I can somehow get it to you, like the value is, it's dependent on the situations. And so some people want an apple, the other person wants an orange. And if you have a bunch of apples and I have a bunch of oranges and we, the value proposition, even though if you're looking at the energy that was required for you to harvest that and for me to harvest it was maybe the same amount of energy, because of where we sit and because of the circumstances of our environment, the value changes dynamically for each one of us. And this is this idea of coincidence of wants. Yeah.
Exactly. So if all value is contextual, the only way to determine value is to exchange the asset for something else. Price discovery is inherent to a store value. Mm-hmm. Because if you have value and the value is contextual and you want to trade it someday in the future, you need an exchange to happen in order to discover the price of your store value. And we see that with Bitcoin right now, by the way, like all the time. Bitcoin is being exchanged for fiat value. And we know the price of Bitcoin as the store value because of its exchange with other fiat currencies. Mm-hmm. And as you flip the coin to the medium of exchange side, you understand there's no medium of exchange without a portion of being able to retain value. A good medium of exchange is an asset that you can exchange for goods and services. But if it doesn't retain value, it's a bad medium of exchange.
I love this idea. So from a first principles standpoint, going back to what we were talking about with the apple and an orange, right? If I exchange, let's say I have the apple and I give it to you, as soon as it passes out of my hand and it hits your hand, let's just imagine that it immediately becomes rotten and you can't eat it or use it for anything immediately upon arrival. Because it didn't have some type of store of value properties, it then becomes worthless immediately.
Exactly. And there are cases, by the way, where it happens. For example, like in the article, I give it the example of cigarettes in prisons. Like it's something that is it's not durable. Like it lasts, like they perish after 1 or 2 weeks. But they use as a medium of exchange all the time in prison in a very specific context. Of course, it doesn't extend outside of the prison walls because it's a very, very poor store value. So if you do kind of in your head, you do the Venn diagram of the medium of exchange on one hand and store value on the other end, you see most of the assets that we use are actually both. Are both store value and they are medium of exchange. And Bitcoin, I got tired of the discourse. Like I got a sick of hearing a sailor talk about Bitcoin as capital and people trying kind of to push the ETF narratives and their own stocks in order for you to buy Bitcoin via proxy. So, and they use kind of the store value medium of exchange narrative in order to say, listen, Bitcoin isn't a medium of exchange. You don't need a direct access to Bitcoin. So if it's a store value, you can buy it via proxy because you're not going to sell it anytime soon. Maybe, but it doesn't mean Bitcoin isn't a medium of exchange. Bitcoin is a very good medium of exchange. Like Bitcoin is being traded in the trillions, tens of trillions of dollars every year.
Yeah.
And if you compare it to the market cap of Bitcoin, like it's high, 1 or 2 or max. Yeah. So I kind of, I wanted kind of to just say my piece and be done with it. And if people don't get it, okay, I'll let them continue with this narrative. But Bitcoin is a great store value and Bitcoin is a great medium of exchange.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to your original question. If I'm claiming such a great medium of exchange, why it's not being widely adopted by all the merchants and why aren't we transacting Bitcoin in our day-to-day lives? And that's basically why I started Breez. And that's why we have a lot of work to do, because I don't think Bitcoin had this gold coin moment where we kind of transform gold from something that is used in ceremonies and in rituals to something that can be easily exchanged and transferred. The Lightning Network is one piece of the puzzle. We definitely made a lot of progress in that regard, but there are still hurdles. Some of the hurdles are technical hurdles. Some of the hurdles are kind of macro related to the wider acceptance of Bitcoin as a currency and the fight that we're still having with regulatory entities to accept Bitcoin as a currency. From a UX standpoint, I think we'll be there soon. You asked me about like the 5 to 10 years vision. I think we'll get there sooner than that. I think it would become very, very easy to transact in Bitcoin, even without the pain points of Lightning, which is the interaction with the main chain and the fees that incur as a result of interacting with the chain. So we'll get there very soon. You can already see solutions like Fedi and solutions like Cashews and solutions like ARC and solutions like what we're doing with Liquid. We're basically using blockchains, other blockchains in order to scale the Bitcoin blockchain. So I think you'll see a proliferation of solutions that are kind of targeting in solving the last mile issues. And we're very, very close.
Which I just want for the audience to understand the context of that last comment. So Blockstream has the Liquid network, which is a federated, just like we were talking about Fedi earlier. This is another federation that you can peg in, peg out. It comes with its own security challenges or whatever, like any federated system does.
It's a different trust profile. I think when you're talking about scaling Bitcoin, you're basically talking about compromising in the trust profile. And then once you accept another trust profile, and even Lightning kind of has some constraint that you need to subscribe to, not in the terms of kind of the consensus, but in terms of you need to be online in order to check your channels and to make sure that you're not being frauded. It's a different trust profile than using the main chain. And in Fedi, you accept the guardians. You need to trust the guardians, and you need to trust the guardians who won't collude to take your money. With Liquid, we're talking about currently it's a federation of 15 organizations, and you need 11 out of 15 functionaries to sign in order for them kind of to steal your money. Next year, we're going to scale the federation to in another order of magnitude. And so the trust profile going to improve. And with solutions like Cashew, you're talking about the minter. You need to trust the minter not to steal your funds. Yeah. In ARC, you're talking about an ASP, like the ARC node. You need to trust the ARC node in some regards. So every last mile solution, including, by the way, other Bitcoin layer 2s, and I'm using layer 2 in a very free form right now, because there's kind of it's a very controversial term. What is a layer 2? But I'm including, for the sake of simplicity, I'm including all the layer 2s here, even layer 2s that don't have unilateral exit from the chain. You basically trust another federation, another consensus algorithm that is different from the Bitcoin main chain. Once you do that, we solve the last mile solution in a different way that is solved using the Lightning Network.
Yeah. Let me just talk about my own personal experience of running my own node, opening a bunch of channels, taking a self-custody wallet and linking it to my node and where I had all this liquidity that I created and doing it, and then going out and conducting transactions on, layer 2 Lightning Bitcoin. And you had talked about earlier about the reliability being like 90 to 95% of the transactions going through on layer 2 today based off of, just global metrics. And what I found personally was that it was a little slow. It was slow relative to just trying to find a pathway, right? When I was doing literally all the technical side, and by the way, this was no task that I would ever want my mother to do or my father.
It doesn't scale.
It doesn't scale. Could I do it? Yep. Did it take a whole lot of effort? It didn't take a terrible amount of effort, but I feel like I'm somewhat technically inclined, and so I was able to do it. The reliability wasn't great. Was I able to conduct trans? Of course, it was. I had a pretty good success rate, but then I go out there, and then other people were providing this service on my behalf. Call it a wallet of Satoshi, or I download the Primal app, and there's a native wallet in there that is using Strike backend and like all these other things that just really make it easy to do. And I'm like, I'll just load $100 worth of sats onto this wallet that somebody else is holding. Where was I at? I was in Mexico last week, and I forget. I was buying something, and the person literally had a we accept Bitcoin here, and I went and I scanned it. I downloaded the Primal app, or I had the Primal app already on my phone. I scanned it, went straight through, no issue, and probably the transaction settled in a second or less, first try. So yeah. I think from a user standpoint, having gone through everything that I had done, before to then seeing that, you can see how a bunch of people just want to basically outsource this. I'm not too concerned if I lose $100. There's $100 on the wallet. If I ran out of money, I could just load it up with another $100 worth of Bitcoin, and just kind of use it in this manner. Is this a concern? Is this a concern that this is the way that this is going to go? What are your thoughts on this being how medium of exchange kind of, maybe the natural market forces are pushing us in this way? Talk us through your thoughts around all of this.
First, I don't argue with the market. The market does what the market does, and it's a good thing. Yeah. I think, so again, a lot to unpack, but what we've done with Breez is to create this notion of an LSP, a Lightning Service Provider. Meaning when you download the self-custodial wallet of Breez, you are connected to a professional node that is very professionally maintained and very tuned to make sure that your payments are going through. By the way, one of the reasons that Lightning matured and became more and more reliable is because we no longer had this. I command you that you ran your own node, probably on your Emerald or whatever. Yeah. But you were part of the reason that the network was flaky. So the less hobbyists we have as node runners, the more professional the network become. And part of the reason that the Lightning payment success rate increased in the past couple of years is because we went through this phase of growing from hobbyists to professionals, and it's a good thing. Like I see it as a positive evolution in the evolution of Lightning. The more professionals, the more money they have, the more liquidity they have, the likelihood of the payment to go through is increases by a lot. So that's one thing. I think the network needs to become more professionals. I think NSP is a notion that we brought to market, and it's now widely adopted. When you use Phoenix, when you use Breez, when you use there are other Zeus or other self-custodial wallets, you're immediately connected to a professional LSP, which helps you in the success rate of the payments and solves the inbound liquidity problem, etc. You were talking about custodial Lightning, meaning when you use Primal, you said it correctly. You're using Strike at the backend. When you use Blink, when you use Bitnob in Africa or Pouchy in the Philippines, you're basically using a custodial service. My concern about custodial services is twofold. One, they can't scale globally, meaning it's a Bitcoin bank, and a Bitcoin bank won't operate globally because all of their regulatory hurdles, and there's no way to use this solution globally. Even there's no fiat payment network that works globally. And if we want to provide the service to all of the people in the world, we can't rely on a custodial service because that won't happen. We have 26,000 fiat payment networks. There's no single fiat network that works globally. So the only way for Bitcoin to be widely and globally accepted is maintaining its peer-to-peer characteristics. That's one thing. Secondly, I think that if we'll continue in building Bitcoin banks, which again, like you said, it's a natural evolution in the acceptance of Bitcoin and the acceptance of Bitcoin in the market. I think that's a positive in that regard, but we'll get into the same fiat problems that we have with fiat today. AML, KYC, bans, frictions. I don't know. I saw a post yesterday of someone was banned from Wise. It happened to me. Like I tried to use Wise, and suddenly the day after they banned me. You'll get to the same problems if you're being reliant on Bitcoin Bank. The fact that Primal works right now doesn't mean it will work tomorrow if they will continue using a Bitcoin Bank at the back end.
Roy, I think this is a really important topic because what you're effectively saying is there's a potential to bifurcate the Lightning Network into a KYC network and a non-KYC network. Is that am I stating this correctly as far as a concern?
Yes. Yeah, Lightning Network is just an implementation detail of Bitcoin. Bitcoin in general can be very like you can have white and black Bitcoin in the future. You already have that with analysis and other products that are kind of using to differentiate between different types of Bitcoins. But definitely it can happen. And by the way, it's already happening. If in the early days of Lightning, every node was able to connect to another node in the network, you can't do that right now. If you're trying to connect to the Cash App node, for example, you can't. Only regulated entities in the US can connect to the Cash App. Yep. There's an example.
Do you think that this is policy driving this? Is the past administration that we're moving away from one of the reasons why Cash App was very hesitant to just allow anybody to connect with them? And do you see that changing potentially if we get more friendly policies? Or do you think that this is...
I think Cash App is a part of Block, which is a public company. It can't take the risks that a company like Breez can take. And definitely being in the US is not easy to be. You need to be concerned about the risk and the regulatory landscape, as we saw with the Samurai trial and in other occasions. So yes, I definitely think that a more open administration can lead to be less risk adverse. Nevertheless, I think we all need to keep in mind that you can't avoid the inherent issue here. If you let someone else take care of your money, that entity is going to be heavily regulated. And that regulation is going to have implication. It's going to have user experience implications, meaning as a user, you will have to KYC and AML every time you make a transaction. And there's risks in them preventing you access to the network. In the future, it happens in fiat. It's going to happen. It's happening in Bitcoin as well. It's going to only get worse in the future. The only way to circumvent that, again, we start this conversation by taking kind of the 100 years vision of one single CBDC versus a peer-to-peer. The only way to circumvent that is by everyone owning their own money and executing peer-to-peer transaction. That's why we're so focused on the peer-to-peer aspects of Bitcoin and the technology proven. I'm a technologist. You start by saying that I'm a developer. Yeah, I believe in technology. I believe in the ability of us to evolve and improve technology. I think we'll get to a point where peer-to-peer transactions are super easy, and not just for us, the Bitcoiners, but for every mainstream users. And if every one of us will be able to make peer-to-peer transactions, there's no reason that peer-to-peer won't be an alternative to banks.
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things that you get when you start talking about federated systems or like Cashew is you get way more privacy with the movement of the coins because of the way that federations work. Yeah. Do you think that this technology, and I know we called it layer 3 earlier, would you agree that it's called a layer 3, or like what would be the correct terminology for these types of technologies?
I think Cashew isn't really a layer 3 because it's not built on Bitcoin at all. Like you can, I think, I don't like to add another layer. Like I think layer 2 is enough.
Okay.
Well, it's complicated enough. Like let's end the discussion on what's a layer 2 and then move to a layer 3. I don't think at this point we need to add another.
So the reason I bring this up is because it almost seems like this technology that people are just starting to build on here in the last year and a half is going to be instrumental in almost being a tailwind to non-KYC'd Lightning and allowing these properties to allow it to continue to propagate where not everything has to be KYC'd. And when we look at that 5, 10, 15-year horizon, is this the thing that maybe actually allows and enables Bitcoin to remain the freedom tech that we all, see it being, because at that grassroots and instrumental level of just like a $1 payment or a cup of coffee type payment, that you can do it with, call it Cashew or a Fediment or something or these like tokens that have an enormous amount of privacy to them. Because once you get down, and I also find this interesting, and I'm sorry to meander all over the place, that layer 1 Bitcoin, where it's really being used as store of value, has a ton of issues with respect to privacy. But as you go further and further away from it in the really high frequency, low value per transaction size, that you get way more privacy once you push down on that part of the spectrum. And I find that really fascinating, right? That's kind of how it's naturally laid out.
One of the most common questions I get asked from family and friends is, Preston, where do you personally buy your Bitcoin from? And the answer is really simple. I buy it on river.com. Not only can you easily buy Bitcoin with 0 fees on recurring orders, you can have peace of mind knowing Bitcoin on River is held 1-to-1 in multi-sig cold storage, all while being fully licensed and regulated in the United States. Plus, their relationship managers are US-based and available by phone for you or your business. Additionally, River has built their own infrastructure from the ground up, which means they don't rely on third parties to function like other Bitcoin exchanges. River also just created a new feature not found anywhere else called River Link. It allows you to send Bitcoin over a text message to easily orange pill your family, pay a friend for dinner, or send a gift. There's a new standard for investing in Bitcoin, and River is setting it. Go to river.com/fundamentals and get up to $100 free when you sign up and buy Bitcoin. That's river.com/fundamentals. Holding Bitcoin is the best way to protect your family from the threat of fiat currency collapse. And few people understand this better than Tony Yazbek, cybersecurity expert and founder of the Bitcoin Way. Tony was in Lebanon when the currency imploded. He's seen the chaos that erupts when the ATMs stop working and the bank accounts get frozen. He knows what it's like to lose everything. But with his cybersecurity expertise and by fully adopting Bitcoin, Tony was able to engineer his escape. And now Tony and the Bitcoin Way team work to make sure this never happens to you. With over 25 years of experience, their expert training empowers you to self-custody your family's Bitcoin the right way, secure your devices and protect your privacy, develop robust inheritance plans, and secure for Plan B citizenship. The Bitcoin Way can transform you into a sovereign individual. You just need to take the first step. Schedule a free consultation today at thebitcoinway.com/TIP.
One easy way to explain it is that as the chain keeps track, it's a global ledger and it keeps tracks on all of the transaction. And once you start building on layers, you no longer have to persist a global state. And if you don't need to persist a global state, then inherently you gain more privacy. You have that in Lightning, by the way, as well, because there's no global state. The state is persisted in the node. And if you are executing transaction, basically the state is persist in the channel, which means it needs to persist by two parties. But there's no global state in Lightning as well. Only if you open the channel or close the channel, then the state resurface in the chain. So there's no ledger, there's no public ledger of the Lightning transaction. Because I always laugh when people give me statistics about the adoption of Lightning, because the only thing that they can see is how much public liquidity is locked in Lightning. They don't see the private liquidity that is locked in Lightning, and they don't see the velocity
the frequency
of the payment, the frequency of the payment. So you can have a solution like ML markets, and if you take a look from an outsider view, you take a look at their node. I don't know how big is the node, like 30, 40 Bitcoin, something like that. But I think people will be shocked when they realize how what's the velocity, how many payments ML markets are actually processing, and what's the throughput of these payments. And I say that because this information is not encapsulated in the chain. Like, you don't know. You have no way to retrieve this information, only if you go and inspect the specific node, which of course naturally you don't have access to to the specific nodes. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
This is an interesting difference from physical reality to the digital realm of money, where I think of it in terms of like electrical engineering. When you open these channels and you're running, frequency through the line, you need the wire to be really large if you're putting a lot of current through the line, or there's a lot of alternating current going through the line. The line would heat up and it would melt down. With this, that's not necessarily the case. You could have a massive channel, and you could be using it very seldomly
or nothing.
It'll still carry the communication of the money transfer, and the line could actually be really small. And you can, because I think the frequency is unlimited, because you're in the digital realm, it just doesn't matter. And so this is really fascinating that you're right. Like, I guess all we can look at are the sizes of the lines connecting the network, but that doesn't necessarily tell you how much the network is being utilized or what the frequency of that exchange is. Yeah, very fascinating, right? Like, it's just taking a step back. I guess I'm just like, as an engineer, I'm looking at certain things that just like make me say, wow, like, how is this happening in the digital realm? And it's so in parallel to the physical. And then some other aspects that are just, slightly different, but yeah. Anyway.
It's like saying you have a 1 gigabyte connection at your home, so you can watch movies that are larger than that's not the case. Like you're downloading gigabytes or maybe terabytes of data on a very small channel.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And the same happens in the Lightning Network. It's actually counterintuitive, but you have a more efficient Lightning node if you get the ratio right between locked liquidity to frequency. Meaning you need to be very efficient with your liquidity, and the more you can route using less liquidity, the more money. And that's the incentives of the Lightning Network. The ratio between the velocity and the throughput of the channels divided by the channel size, that is the kind of the calculation for the profitability of the channel and the node. So the less liquidity you log, but you're still able to process the payments that going through your node, the more efficient, the more economical, the more money you make as a Lightning node. Yeah. And many node operators are making the very beginners, like noobs, mistake of putting a lot of liquidity early on.
Yeah.
And that's they don't need to. And this liquidity is under.
Their channels are just get exhausted. Well, their channels will just get exhausted to the edge node of where all the buying is taking place, right?
even if they're going to be used at all.
Yeah.
Exhaustion means there's frequency. There's payment coming through. It's a good sign. If your channel is exhausted, it means again, it depends on the time spent. But if your channel has been exhausted, it means that you were able to successfully route payments, which is a good thing. There's a lot of nodes. If you look at kind of the Lightning Terminal or Amboss or other Lightning Store, you immediately identify the nodes that allocate tons of liquidity. Be cautious about these nodes, because either they want to artificially capture traffic, or they simply don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, which in my case was exactly what it was when I was running my own node.
You're still running your node?
I still run my node, but the channel capacity and all that, I've just, it was just too much effort and too much hassle. But I learned a ton by doing it. Like I learned an absolute ton. And according to you, now the network can run a little bit more efficiently because amateur Preston isn't there clogging things up. Let's talk about your software development kit. So Breez has an SDK. That's what that stands for. It's very popular amongst developers that are building on Lightning. Explain to the audience what this is, why it's important, what value it really provides to vendors or people that are building businesses on Lightning.
Yep. Allow me to take a step back again, because we talked a lot about Bitcoin and Bitcoin as a global currency. The part that we want to play in that regard is that we want to bring Lightning to every application. Basically, I don't think merchant adoption. There's a lot of discourse about merchant adoption. I don't think Bitcoin right now provides enough value for people to use it in the context of buying physical goods or even digital goods. I don't think that's kind of the play where we're going to see Bitcoin adoption. So what we want to do, we want to bring Bitcoin to every application and service out there in this kind of concept of creating Bitcoin or setting Bitcoin as a global currency. So imagine you using TikTok and you want kind of to tip a TikToker, or as a TikToker, you want to earn money. We want Bitcoin to be the currency that you do that. We want Bitcoin to facilitate these digital interactions. But the barrier of entry for developers today to embed Bitcoin payments into their solutions is super high. In order to, before the Breez SDK, if you wanted to add Lightning payments to your solution or your application, you had to have a dedicated Lightning team working on this project for 2 or 3 years. And basically what we do with the Lightning SDK, with the Breez SDK, is lowering the barrier of entry, and we're continuing to lower it every day. For you, as a developer, to integrate Bitcoin payments into your application or solution, it can take days, and we haven't had developers integrating Lightning in hours. So we're continuing to kind of lower the barrier of entry of embedding Bitcoin payments into apps and services. And basically that's our goal. Our goal is kind of to provide the best developer experience out there for embedding Bitcoin payments in applications and solutions. We have 2 flavors of our SDK. We have a native implementation, which is built on top of Greenlight by Blockstream, where we learned a lot from the Breez wallet and the work that we've done on Lightning over the years. And we've managed kind of to simplify everything, for example, by running nodes in the cloud, using the Greenlight infrastructure, providing automated Lightning liquidity services, providing automated on-chain interoperability services, and everything is encapsulated in the SDK in a very simple API. You have one API to send the payment, one API to receive the payment, and all the heavy lifting is done on the backend. And we recently added a very popular, it took off kind of much faster than I expected. We created a nodeless implementation. And in the nodeless implementation of our SDK, users don't even need to run Lightning nodes because the underlying technology is liquid. So people hold their funds in liquid, but the interface is still a Lightning interface. We talked about Lightning as the common language. basically the SDK exposes a Lightning interface, but it uses a different sidechain in order to preserve the funds and people.
In that scenario, and sorry to interrupt you. So you're outsourcing somebody else running the node, which means there's private keys associated with that node that's interacting with layer 1 Bitcoin. Is that correct?
In the nodeless architecture, you still hold your funds and you hold the keys, but you hold it in a liquid wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And when you want to do a Lightning transaction, you basically do an atomic swap, a submarine swap, between liquid to Lightning. So you're always in custody over your fund, and there's no way for an intermediary or third party to steal your fund, even in that implementation, in the nodeless implementation. But there's no need for an LSD, and there's no need for an on-chain fee to occur, because you're not interfacing with Lightning using Lightning channels. You're interfacing with Lightning using atomic swaps.
Got it. So while you'd be holding funds in liquid, that's where the you're trusting
the federation, the liquid federation.
Yeah, the liquid federation. Okay, thank you. Okay.
So if you compare the native SDK implementation to the nodeless SDK implementation, the trust profile is different, because in the native implementation, you just trust the chain.
Yeah.
In the nodeless implementation, you trust the liquid federation. But it comes with
the
advantages.
Not running your own node and doing all the technical swoopy things that, I talked about earlier being so challenging. Yeah.
Well, in the native implementation, you don't do that as well, because everything is covered by the LSD. Basically, the LSD open channels, the LSD manages the liquidity, the LSD routes the payment. The difference is that you don't have channel management fees.
Yeah.
Basically, you don't need to pay an on-chain fee in order to onboard to Lightning, and there's no friction when it comes to closing channels or anything like that, because one of the functions of the LSD is to allocate liquidity, to reallocate liquidity. So it means that if you don't use the channel, the LSD needs to take your liquidity and use it for other users. And that means that they effectively will either close your channels or decrease your inbound liquidity. And that creates friction, because next time you want to receive a payment, then another on-chain fee will occur. You don't have that with the nodeless implementation. So from a developer experience, it's much easier to integrate the nodeless implementation, because you're not dealing with opening or closing channels and fees. But yes, you need to kind of subscribe to the liquid trust profile.
When I look at all these technical solutions and I see how robust all of it is, I'm starting to up until now, I think if we went back 4 years ago, you were talking about how poor the reliability was, when you were at, I think, the conference in Atlanta or wherever you were at. And today, I think that we're quickly moving away from that, where the barriers or the challenges for a vendor to start being onboarding and paying in Bitcoin, I don't think it's originating necessarily from technical challenges anymore. What it seems to me is if I'm a vendor and all of my bills are denominated in dollars and I'm receiving payments coming through the door, then let's say my top line is $100 and my expenses are $90 and they're denominated in dollars. That means I have free cash flows of $10, which I can then sweep into Bitcoin if I want to, preserve that buying power and put it into something that's going to continue to grow. And I think this is how everybody is functioning today. This is how I'm operating as a business today, and many others that I know. MicroStrategy's maybe a little bit fancier with how they're implementing this. But at the end of the day, as long as that $90 of expense structure exists, and I mean, this could be a mom and pop, just store gas station for all we could be talking about, right? As long as those bills are all denominated in dollars, a lot of them don't want to be accepting Bitcoin payments, because then they effectively, if I get $1 worth of Bitcoin as a payment, I almost have to immediately take 90% of that, based on the math I was just describing, immediately turn it into dollars, and then I can keep the other 10% still in Bitcoin, because my bills at the end of the month are in dollars, and I need to remove that variance of the price action versus, between Bitcoin and dollars. And you go to, the developing nations, let's say we're going somewhere where the inflation rate somewhere else is 50% annualized. They're having to deal with this volatility in their underlying currency and their expenses still being denominated in dollars or that underlying currency. And it just creates massive challenges for them to really want to accept this as a form of payment. Do you think that that's the number one thing holding us up, or is there something? Yeah.
Tax. I think capital gain tax is definitely
that too.
A huge barrier, and volatility. Yes, although I think that volatility can also be a feature, not a bug. Meaning, if you're a Bitcoiner and you understand the Bitcoin trajectory and you understand that the number goes up, you want volatility. Basically, because the volatility is going your end. If you can kind of retain the funds and not use it for expense. So let's take a company like Atom, for example, like the shoe company that accepts Bitcoin. Yes, not all the customers of Atom use Bitcoin to purchase shoes, but let's say you have 10, 20% done. Do you use a Bitcoin to purchase shoes? And they put it immediately into their treasury.
It's the same math. Yeah, it's the same math.
It's the same.
Yeah,
exactly. So volatility goes both ways. Yes, of course, if you're in a survival mode and you're dependent on every penny that goes into the business, you understand that you need to pay expenses or buy groceries with it doesn't fit the model. But another thing I think is very important to understand: the more Bitcoin is used as a medium of exchange, meaning the more price discovery happens for Bitcoin, the less volatile Bitcoin will be.
Especially compared to physical, real things, not necessarily fiat currencies, but like real physical things. Exactly.
Well, but even like the Nigerian naira isn't like you can't really trust it, right? Like it can be fluctuated 40% the day after day. So I think crazy things happens in fiat, less crazy things happen in Bitcoin. And I think the trajectory is very clear where Bitcoin is headed. So I think of course, the innovators and the early adopters already accept Bitcoin as a mean of payment. I think people will be surprised to understand and to know how many merchants already accept Bitcoin as there's a reason all the luxury brands accept Bitcoin. Like you can buy Louis Vuitton bags and you can buy Ferrari and you can buy Balenciaga. You can buy everything in Bitcoin. And of course, yes, it's luxury brand. Still not the $5 coffee, but of course, in the 10, 15 years, the time spent that we're talking about, I think you'll be able to buy everything in Bitcoin.
It's so fascinating. And I'll tell you what, Roy, from a strategic standpoint, just kind of understanding where so much of this is going, you have always been just so helpful for me personally. I've just cherished the conversations we've had in Nashville and other locations where we've had an opportunity to just kind of talk in person. And this is like all of those other conversations. So I thank you so much for your time and coming on. Is there anything else that you want to highlight to the audience or throw out there that you guys are working on? I did want to say this with respect to the SDK that we were talking about earlier. I know you had this Yopaki case study that happened in Mexico recently. I don't know if you want to talk about that or anything else that you want to highlight to the audience.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yopaki is another example. We have 2 live implementations of our nodeless integration that just came out a month ago. We have StashPay by Tanker that is creating an app for freelancers to be able to accept Bitcoin. And Yopaki is the second implementation. It's a Mexican neobank. It's a fascinating app, by the way. It shows you, Yopaki is a good example to show you how much the things are and applications are not rational. Like if everything is so emotional, meaning you need to there's no one size fits all when it comes to money. You need to speak in the language of your users, and Yopaki is a great example for that. Because something like Fold, and I love Will and I love Fold, but something like Fold won't work in Mexico because there's no culture affiliation to Fold. In Yopaki, for example, they have a feature called the Loteria. And Loteria is something that is very common in Mexico. Is like a Mexican raffle, and they brought the same feature to their app, and they're speaking the language of their users. And that's one of the things I like to see with the Breez SDK. One of the reasons I was always kind of pushing to build something like the Breez SDK is because there's no one size fits all, and we need to have hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands of applications fulfilling different requirements and different speaking different languages, addressing different use cases. So we're starting to see like the first nodeless integration coming to market. I think you'll be surprised next year to see how many existing applications, not new applications, existing applications adopting Lightning, using the Breez SDK, and even tens of millions of users using traditional fintech product. We already see that with Cash App, but you're going to see other fintech solutions like Robinhood and others supporting Lightning. So exciting times.
Amazing. Where can people learn more about Breez?
I'm everywhere, and Breez is everywhere. I think our Medium is a good entry point.
Okay.
Medium.com/Breez Technology. And our Twitter, X, whatever, I'm on LinkedIn. Like, I'm easy to find.
Awesome. We'll have links to all of that in the show notes. Roy, thank you so much for making time and coming on the show today.
Thank you, Preston. Thank you so much.
What we're launching at River is a high yield cash account that pays out interest in Bitcoin. And what this allows you to do is save your cash in an FDIC insured cash account with a bank powering it behind the scenes. And your interest is paid out in Bitcoin. And so if you look at how that would have performed over the last 4 years, your effective interest rate would have been in the teens.